Greetings, listeners, and welcome to The Spiritual Experience, a show where we share stories of life, love, and redemption for all of humanity on Earth. So sit back and enjoy. Try to identify with the speakers and not compare. Don't forget to subscribe on all podcast platforms. I'm your host, Jay Lewis, and here we go. All right, everybody, ladies and gentle people, so that way you don't get fucking offended. Whomever you are, however you are, welcome back, Spiritual Experience. I hope you guys are strapped in today. We got one of my close friends that, you know, we've been in the river together a long time, and I haven't seen him since before COVID. And I'm happy that he's here now, and I know that he's not going to be offended me calling him a he. Which is, I'm going to make that assumption, you know, because he's my brother and I love him dearly. I'm going to introduce you guys to Tim. Tim, say hello.
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
All right, Tim, where are you from?
Well, I grew up in New York, although I was born in Southern California, but moved to New York when I was about 3 years old.
Yeah, and what was it like? You have siblings? What's the story?
Well, I have a one half sister, but she was born when I was like 13.
Oh, so it's a big age gap. So
yeah, it's a big age gap. Yeah.
So you were like the only child for a while.
Yeah, I was only child for a while.
What was that like?
I wanted a sibling.
Really?
It was like too much attention paid on me by my, particularly by my mom. I was just like, overprotective mother.
Yeah.
But I was her only child.
What about your dad?
Well, my parents divorced when I was 2, so he stayed on the West Coast, and she took me out to New York City.
Did you go see him often or no?
Like once I'd say like during the summer, and when I wasn't in school at first. Yeah.
And what was that like?
It was cool at first. I mean, like California's kind of cool where we were. Southern California.
It's a whole different thing than New York City.
Yeah. I mean, as a kid, you don't really notice that as much, I think. But I remember one summer, my dad had remarried, and he lived we were like in some sort of like big trailer in somewhere in the California mountains, and we didn't have electricity all summer. It was like the best summer of my life.
Right.
Like no electricity.
That would be like torture today for these kids. They couldn't handle it. When I was a kid, similar to you, when you went outside, you were just outside.
Yeah.
Like that was it. That was it. So,
yeah.
So how were you in school? What was that like?
School. I mean, I was a good student. I was tracked to be in some of the best classes in school. Some years I did better than others, depending on how much I was fooling around. Yeah.
So what's the story? When did drugs and alcohol enter your life?
Drugs and alcohol. It would have been around high school, probably usually around sophomore year, I would say. As far as alcohol is concerned. So at the time, I grew up in Brooklyn and Staten Island. I lived in Far Rockaway for a little bit, but mostly Brooklyn and Staten Island. And so at the time, in high school, I was in South Shore, Staten Island, and we used to have keg parties on the South Shore golf course.
No way.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was fun just to get together with all the other neighborhood kids, and then it started getting big because word got around. So all these kids from all these other neighborhoods would come over, and there'd be girls there, and you make out with this girl, make out with that girl, and eventually the cops get wind of it, right?
Does anybody get in trouble? The cops just come and say, "Get out of here."
No. So the cops come, and I was on the track team at the time, so I outran the cops.
Nice.
And then the next time it happened, I didn't go. Just by chance, I forget why. That time, the cops had surrounded the place, so everybody got arrested.
Wow.
I lucked out. I wasn't there.
Right, and you were in high school at the time, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. So what happens next?
What happens next then is my junior year, right? And so, you start buckling down if you're looking to apply for colleges. So, I just put that to the side, and so later on, when drugs and alcohol entered the pictures again, I mean, that was like later in college. I'd done the same thing. Well, that would have been much later, almost 10 years later. But, as far as like, one thing I remember is as a kid, I must have been 13 or 14, and I never tried marijuana before. So on the handball courts of, this is in Rossville neighborhood in South Shore, Staten Island, and all these kids smoking blunts, right? And we're behind the handball court, and I have this experience, and every time after that, I never had that same experience again until like 10 years later. I'm up in Boston because I moved to Boston and go to college.
Where'd you go to school?
MIT.
Nice.
And I mean, this was, at this point I had dropped out of college, like 2 classes short of my bachelor's degree. I was just partying and working at a startup.
No way.
Yeah, so
2 classes short of the bachelor's from MIT. That's not CSI.
Well, I went back later and got my bachelor's and my master's, but so I'm telling the story sort of non-linearly, but it's all good. So let's see. Yeah, it must have been my mid-20s, right? So, we got some dust. This is up in Boston, and I was smoking, and I'm just like, that's why the first time was so different, right? Because that first time I had a joint, a blunt,
right?
It was dusted.
Wow.
Which is very common in New York City to get marijuana that's dusted, right?
Sure.
Right.
Sometimes, like, me and my friends, we used to, I make this joke, like, there were some of us that were happy when the weed was laced. And that was me. Like, when they're like, oh, man, I think this is laced with something, I'd be like, yeah. Like, and then there's some other kids, they'd get, like, paranoid, like, huh? Yeah. Like, no. Whatever's coming, especially when you're young like that, when you're like, you're just like, dude, because, there's no real consequence. You're going where the day takes you.
Right.
Right. But now, you're a semi-adult. You're in your 20s. You're far away from home.
Right.
You're living up there, with these other guys. Now these kids that you went to college with also, they're also like, super smart guys, or just like, did you find yourself in the street with like maniacs?
Oh, you mean who was I partying with?
Yeah.
Mostly people not at MIT, but there were a few MIT grads, people who had kept it together enough to graduate. But I mean, at the time, and I'll tell this when I qualify as, I think it was like my senior college, and I had an opportunity to work at a startup, and at the time it was paying $20 an hour, and this is in the year '99, and for a college student, that's a lot of money at the time. And I could, I was working, I was going to school, and I was partying, but I didn't have time for all three, right? So obviously the working's going to pay for the partying, so you can imagine which one I dropped.
Right.
And I tried to finish school, but I think in the fall, after at that time I'm like a super senior, I'm just taking one class. Can I do this one class? I still couldn't. I ended up getting it incomplete, which I ended up finishing later.
Right. What was your relationship like with your family when this was going on?
Oh, they had no clue. I mean, my mom suspected a few times, because one time they lived in Jersey, and I went home. She's like, "Are you high?" And I'm like denying it, like, no.
Right.
Right. But for the most part, when I got sober, they were sort of surprised. They didn't know.
Yeah. Well, because you seemingly had it together. You're working at a startup.
Right.
You went to college. You're doing the right thing. The police aren't looking for you. Like, you don't have all of the textbook technical signs of somebody who has a problem. You have all your teeth.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, I didn't get sober though until I moved back to New York.
Right.
Right. So I worked at that startup from '99 to 2003. Went back to school, finished school, moved back to New York, sort of pulled a geographic. So what had happened is, I realized I need to get the hell out of Boston. I just knew too many people. I had too many connections.
Right.
But if I left Boston before finishing school, I was never going to finish school.
You had that cognitive thought, like you really.
Yeah, it's just too hard to go back. Yeah. So I mean, because you move back to New York, you get a job, they don't care, you're getting paid well. Why would you ever go back and finish school?
Right.
Right. So you know, and they had told me, the company I worked at the time, they were like, you know, it's okay if you don't go back. I'm like, no, I really need to do this.
That's funny.
And so.
Were you doing well at work?
Yeah, I mean, I was missing a fair amount of work from at that time, it was more than just alcohol, it was a fair amount of drugs.
Yeah. Are you staying up all night?
Yeah, I mean, I joke sometimes that like my weekend started Thursday night and ended Tuesday.
Yeah.
Right, and I also joke that, you know, this may be a little bit of an exaggeration, but not totally, is, you know, I set up some of the computers, only I knew how they worked.
Right.
So what are they going to do? Fire the person now?
That's so funny. Yeah, what are they going to do?
Right, but I mean, I think it was more than that. But I survived 2 rounds of layoffs despite the, you know, it was having an impact on my work, of course, right? But
were they sitting you down and intervening, or just kind of like sending smoke signals?
I mean, they suspected.
Right.
They definitely probably suspected, but no, I kept my job. And so you could just imagine that fuels the denial.
Sure.
But
yeah, because, you know, you have that to hold on to.
Right.
And that's
Right.
fueling everything else. I remember when I was in a similar predicament, where like I was working for these guys, and they were just like, listen. And I was this when I was working on Wall Street on the telephone, and I was pretty good at what I did. And they were like, look, we'll send you wherever you need to go. Mm-hmm. We'll pay.
Right.
We'll do whatever. Like, nobody has to know.
Right.
But like, you know, there are people who are underneath you who are watching you thinking that that's what you're supposed to be doing. You know? So there was like that kind of intervention. They were like,
right.
like, oh, well, at the time they called me Baby Alfred. They're like, look at Baby Alfred. He's on fucking heroin, and he's opening accounts, and he's fucking,
right.
you know, blah, 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 and he's
right.
succeeding. And
right.
these other kids, like, they're like, yeah, you know, so the gifts that I had, but it was apparent. Like, you know, I wasn't hiding. In my mind, I was hiding, because I told him, I said, no, I'm okay. You know, I'll get it under control. Meanwhile, like, you know, that was like one step down a ladder that, you know, went into the basement. You know
right.
what I'm saying?
Right. And the thing is, we can hit our spiritual bottom before we hit the bottom that's apparent to everybody else outside, or it results in us losing our job or our home, right?
Yeah, but do you also think maybe that the people who are around us, some of them are also in denial of what they're seeing?
Because they don't want it to be true. Yeah.
I believe that to a degree.
Yeah.
Or they don't know what to say or how to handle that. Like, they don't know, like, you know, a lot of my family, they don't, you know, I have family members now that have drug problems that is almost like a halfway open secret.
Right.
And nobody wants to tell them or tell their mother, listen, this one is out of control right now.
Right.
You know? And then, you know, how do you, yeah, from looking from the outside, I can imagine what it's like. You know, you're working at this company, they're laying people off. You're an important person. Otherwise, they would have threw you away with all these other people.
Yes.
Right? So in your own mind, you're just like, well, I guess this is my life.
Well, I mean, I hit such a spiritual bottom. I wanted to quit. I wanted to stop, right? I just didn't know how.
Right.
I had heard of AA, but I didn't hear of like other programs besides that. And at the time, it was mostly the drugs and not alcohol, right?
Right. Now, were you like physically addicted also? Or was it
No.
just like continuous, like this is just what I do every day?
It wasn't even every day. It was like every other weekend.
Wow.
But again, the weekend started Thursday night.
Yeah. So every other weekend you'd be up for 4 days.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be on, yeah.
Yeah, and then you're like psychosis.
Yeah, there was a few instances of definitely some forms of psychosis, auditory hallucinations, that sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah. You learn that kind of stuff now. You know, we have a lot of the same interests, and that's what makes us good friends. But it's, when you think about it, when the military captures somebody, it's one of the things they do is sleep deprivation.
Right.
Yeah, that's how they get information. That's how, it's like a form of torture.
Yes.
Meanwhile, I'm doing it to myself, and it don't matter if it's Sound Factory or whatever, like, or
Right.
some
Right.
concrete jungle rape. Like, it doesn't
Right.
matter. Like,
Right.
I'm doing it to myself. Meanwhile, this is like, oh, if we capture you, bin Laden, Badaden, whatever,
Right.
Arab person, we're going to put you in Guantanamo, and you're not going to sleep for 3 days, and fucking, yeah. And we're doing it to ourselves,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
That's so wild. So how did the end start showing up for you?
Well, I had moved back to New York in 2005, right? So I had gone back in 2003, you know, and in a semester I had finished my bachelor's degree, and, you know, halfway through I asked, because I was originally admitted to the master's program as well. I said, I can still do this. Then, you know, the administrator's like, do we hate you? I'm like, I don't think so. She's like, yeah. So, you know, then I finished that by 2005, and
Were you still working while you're doing your master's or no?
No, I quit
Right.
my job because I just remembered how difficult it was to juggle everything before, and so no, I quit. But,
How were you paying your bills and stuff?
well, I had money saved. It was a startup. I did well, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had money saved to go back to school, and I was living in the dorms.
Oh.
No, I mean the first semester. No, I went back. I was undergrad. I stayed in the apartment I was at, but then I moved on campus once I was a graduate student.
Right.
Yeah.
And you finished all the way through still partying?
No. I had stopped talking to a fair amount of my party buddies at the time, but they knew what was up. They knew I wasn't. It wasn't because I didn't like them anymore. I didn't love them anymore. They knew what was up. They're like, okay, Tim's going back to school. He's getting his shit together, and they totally understood.
Wow.
Which is good because one of my friends was eventually deported because he was basically caught trafficking drugs interstate.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he wasn't from here and they sent him home?
Yeah, he's from the Philippines. Yeah.
Yeah, I had friends like that, but they were like from Haiti. And you get in trouble here, they're like, oh, no, you're not going to jail. You're just gone.
Yeah.
You know, which in some cases is worse than jail, you know, because here's where the opportunity is, you know. Okay, so then you get your master's. What happens next?
So then I knew, then I was like, okay, time to pull the geographic, right, to follow up. And so I moved back to New York.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's also where I grew up, so, you know, I missed New York. So moved to Brooklyn, get a job, and swear off drugs. But alcohol is not the problem, right?
Allegedly. He's like, right hand to God. Okay, I'm not going to put anything up my nose, but like, you know, yeah.
Right. And so, you know, so of course the alcohol use increases. And now and then there's a little bit of cocaine, but, you know, I delete the dealer's phone number the next morning, so obviously I don't have a problem. Right. But the alcohol use keeps continuing.
Right.
You know.
And you have a job, you're working, you're holding it together.
Well, yeah, the job that I held at the time, some of them were alcoholics too. Yeah. So you know, it was just the way it was. We had like this beautiful roof garden. We have these crazy parties, and, you know, tons of alcohol and also weed. Although I was never really went into weed unless it was laced.
Yeah.
I was always more of a stimulant person, right?
Right.
Or dissociative, I guess, in that case. But I guess dust is sort of combo stimulant / dissociative. But so yeah, I mean, it had started becoming a problem.
Yeah.
And I had I saw a shrink at the time, a psychoanalyst, and
was this the first time you sat with one?
No, I had like 2 shrinks in Boston, short term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that you volunteered, say, okay, I need to go see somebody?
Yeah.
What did they say, and what did you think?
Well, the first one I saw at the beginning of my drug use, and it was mostly going to see her because I had like some symptoms of depression, and but then I stopped seeing her because I couldn't be honest about my drug use.
Right.
And then not that she knew, I just noticed catching myself lying, and I was just like, I can't talk to her, what's the point if I'm just going to lie? And then the second one, that I was starting to have like mental health issues from my using.
Right.
Right.
That's because to me,
like psychotic breaks, stuff like that.
Right. Because to me, like I was having, like what we were talking about, like before the show, where, I was at a party and somebody was describing adolescence and to about a 15-year-old kid, but like, no, he was an addict. I'm like, yeah, it sounds like regular adolescence to me.
Right.
But then the abuse that I did to myself, could have put me on the spectrum for all kind of things, because it was like, okay, this was not like nature versus nurture. Like I did it to myself. Like I know that, you could have neurological dysfunction from mountains of, cocaine and vodka and fucking pills and Xanax and days. And like, I remember one time I described to somebody, well, like an average, like one night we would go out and I would always be drinking. So however many cocktails you have in a night is however many you have in a night. So cocktails, whatever, 15 vodkas, right? On top of like 4 E-pills and then cocaine, and then at 6 a.m, a stick of Xanax. To be like, okay, now it's time to go to sleep. Like I would do that with one of my boys that lived. These 2 brothers, they lived in Middle Village, or they were from Queens Village, whatever, Middle Village in Queens, and that was Wednesday.
Right.
But what that does to you, eventually your stuff is going to start misfiring.
Right. But I should also add that, and this is also my experience, the brain and the body have a remarkable ability to heal.
Oh, of course.
And I knew that even when I went back to school, right? So when I went back to school after working at the Startup for 4 years, let's see, how old was I? So that would have been 2003. I would have been 26 years old.
Right.
Right. Now, when I did what I call the raver progression, right? Which is ecstasy to special K to crystal meth.
Yeah.
Right. And so at the beginning was ecstasy. Now, if you do any fair amount of ecstasy use, you lose a fair amount of intelligence, right? Your brain just not working. If
I couldn't even function the next day. I didn't want to talk to anybody. That's why I took people like, I was like, listen, I've taken ecstasy 20 times to make sure I didn't like it. 20 different occasions. That's why some of them would be like, they used to call them barrels. It'd be like, oh yeah, that 3 barrels. Like, I would take it and I would take more because the next day I was so antisocial that I didn't like the way I felt the next day. So I just didn't do it anymore.
Right. I mean, like for me, it was affecting my ability to do schoolwork, which is also part of the reason I had to drop out.
Right.
My brain wasn't. And so, by the time I had gone back to school, now I'm like, I forget. I must have been like 3-6 months abstinent from this time from, all the hard drugs, and at least a few years absence from ecstasy. My brain was working a lot better, right? And so my GPA shot up. Whereas before I was a B student, before I started doing drugs. Now I went back, I was an A student, right? And so I was just able to do better. And then, I'm handling stuff better than before I even started doing drugs, right? And so the brain just has a remarkable ability to heal, especially if you supplement it with sleep, diet, and exercise. Right. And I honestly think it's more or less in that order. Sleep and diet are more or less tied, but exercise definitely comes after those 2.
Sure. Yeah. So then you're back in New York, seeing a shrink.
Yeah.
What's the story?
She's like, she pretty much tells me I got to go to AA.
Really?
Yeah. She's like, you just can't have one. And you know what I say? Who has just one?
Right.
It's just one drink.
Doesn't even make sense.
But what had done it for me was, I remember the date this was, because it was like, it was the last day I drank. And so it's my sobriety date. I mean, some people count the sobriety date as the day after, the day before. But you'll notice in AA, they always say that they talk about when Bill last had his last drink. They don't give him a sobriety date. They say his last drink was on such and such, 1935, right?
Right.
And so that was the day of my last drink, was October 11th, 2009. And it was a Saturday. And I was meeting out friends. And so I lived in Brooklyn at the time.
Right.
I was meeting friends in Staten Island for just to play wiffle ball in the morning, 10 a.m. in the morning. I show up with all this beer. Nobody else wants any.
No way.
So I'm like, more for me?
Are these kids you grew up with?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. None of them wanted. They're like, 10 a.m. in the morning. But they're also like not very judging people. So they're like, go ahead, Tim, have a good time. But then that's just like a whole nother night of debauchery. Right? Of course, I drive back into Brooklyn after that, and, then it's just a whole night of debauchery, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, the next day I was like, maybe my shrink's right. So I decided to humor her the next day, which would have been a Monday. And October 13th, 2009 was Columbus Day, right? So I tried to go to this one meeting. It was closed because they were redoing the floors.
Nice.
So it said, go up the block to this other meeting. So go up the block to the other meeting, which has a church, but it was moved because it was Columbus Day and the church was closed. And so I had a sign, go over here.
That's so funny.
So I had two excuses at this point to not go. I must have really wanted it. So I went, it's a big meeting, right? And raised my hand. At first they were like, anybody else? And I sort of just like, raised my hand. People were like, him. Raised my hand. I say, Tim, I'm an addict. At the time I said addict. Now I say alcoholic. I just do whatever to identify. Facilitate identification. That's what I think is important for me now. Back then it was more like about me. But I have 2 days. The whole room erupted in applause. And at the end of the meeting, there were a line of men to give me their phone numbers.
Right.
And this was a good-looking crew. Good-looking guys, good-looking girls. And I'm just like, this is AA?
Yeah.
Right? So, it's just, it's almost, sometimes I share, like, I had to almost take a second step before I could take my first step, right? I had to come to believe this could work for me before I can come out of my denial. Right. Otherwise, if I think sobriety is just a life of misery, why would I admit I have a problem?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even know what to expect. I just know I didn't want what I had.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's for sure. That's for sure.
I was suffering.
Right. I just didn't know there was a way out.
Right.
A good way out.
Yeah.
Right. And so at the same time, once I knew there was a good way out, which is sort of a second step, right? You come to believe, it says come to believe a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. There's many ways of interpreting that.
Right.
Right. It's coming to believe this is going to work. Right. Right. So it's once I come to believe, oh shoot, there's a way out in this, I can have a good life, then it's like, of course I don't want that no more.
Yeah.
Right? Because without some sort of program, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be AA or 12 steps or whatever. There's many ways to get sober, I think. Right?
I agree.
There's a reason why I got addicted. Right?
Knowing yourself now, what do you think that is?
I'm in the Gabor Mate camp. You know who Gabor Mate is?
Elaborate.
Okay, so Gabor Mate's is he a psychologist? I think he might be a medical doctor. Anyway, he's out of Canada, right? and he's done a lot of work with addicts at I think it was at a safe injection site in Vancouver, I want to say. Anyway, he studied addiction a lot. He studied a bunch of things. He studied like ADHD. He studied his big thing is trauma.
Right.
Right. And so I can't remember. He probably ties trauma to ADHD. I don't remember. But he ties trauma to like, especially to all sorts of things, cancer, lots of things. Right. Now, I don't necessarily do that. I mean, like sometimes I feel like, if you have a hammer, now everything looks like a nail. But he had insight about autoimmune disease, which may have been also important for me. I can get into that later if you want, because it ties into codependency. But so his belief is that most roots of addiction lie in trauma. Now that said, there's also a genetic component to it as well, right? And so while I was sober, am still sober. After I had gotten sober, I had a psychiatrist at the time, and we had genetic testing done, and one of it said, "Oh, Tim, you react very well to stimulants."
Like, no shit.
Right. So, but there's many things at play, right? And when you combine certain things, you get somebody is easily addicted to such and such substance or such and such behavior, or but I'm totally in the Gabor Mate camp that like trauma is just like the root of a lot of the world's problems.
Yeah, I think for me, I look at it with myself. Everybody has their own diagnosis, right?
Right.
And everybody deserves that, and they deserve. All of it is valid.
Right.
Like, all of it. I don't disregard any of it. For me, I had an incessant need to leave the moment.
Right.
I couldn't handle the moment.
Right.
But that was also coupled with a physical addiction that maybe is like the DNA component.
Yeah.
That there are people who maybe have that other psychological low self-esteem, center of the universe, all these other things that maybe they're not magnified, or even if they are, but they can have 4 beers and stop, because they don't have a physical thing and that will not allow them to stop. Like, even if I want to stop, I will not.
Right.
So like the one thing triggers the other thing, and then you're in that friggin' cycle. I laughed so hard on the inside when you said that the lady said you reacted well to stimulants. You don't even have to tell her your story anymore.
Well, she already knew.
No, but imagine if somebody else did that, if they did whatever, like, you're really, like if somebody told me, yeah, blah, 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 it's like, of course, So for me, like with trauma, there are things that I've maybe found traumatic.
Sure.
And that's what I mean by everybody, what's real to them is real to them in that moment. It could be my dad didn't get me the right bicycle.
Well, yeah, but you see, trauma is not just what happens to you, is how you respond.
Right, your interpretation of what happens, and then how you respond to that.
Right, I forget, there's a woman, scientist, probably doctor, however many decades ago. It's in Bessel van der Kolk's book, Body Keeps the Score, and her conclusion in one of her papers was like, whether a child gets trauma from a certain incident or not is that, I don't like her choice of words here. It's the child's choice. I don't think it's a conscious choice. It just means it varies widely by child to child.
Right, but there's also studies that say, like, okay, if you were in the womb and your mom was getting her ass kicked, you're different than somebody that didn't, and it wasn't happening to you. Or just
No, you feel that.
Right.
I believe you feel that.
Me too. And even if it's not even just physical abuse, let's say mental and emotional abuse, the stress is you know what I'm saying? So you come out already traumatized.
Not being able to, I'm not trying to argue, diagnose you or anything like that, but one of the symptoms of trauma a possible symptom is inability to sit with yourself in your own skin.
Sure.
Wanting to check out.
Right.
Right? Because your sympathetic nervous system is just on all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. We just had my boy Johnny Vett on here.
Yes.
Where he takes that shot. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. For me, it was yoga later on. I started practice yoga.
Right, but you find so you're getting this knowledge along with spiritual components or whatever relief you're getting from like 12-step AA,
right.
boom.
And yoga, yeah.
Right.
Yoga too.
And your life is starting to come together. How do you...
Still is.
Yeah. No, you're killing it. So, but how do you go from this foundation of, okay, I'm in this room with these people. They look like they got it together. I think I'm going to stick around. Like, how does that bedrock build and then grow into, what you have
Well, initially,
yeah.
I just the meeting I went into, it wasn't, AA lists like the different meeting types. It wasn't an officially gay meeting, but it was a de facto gay meeting, right? And so, I'm a straight guy, but like I kept going to that meeting because there wasn't any straight women to distract me.
Right.
Right. And so, and I needed to not be distracted. Right. There's a lot of pretty girls in New York City. I'm easily distracted. So
this is true.
So I often say that, the queens of West Village AA nursed this baby back to health.
Right.
They just loved me. They just said, keep coming to him. And they just gave me love, 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 and love.
Wow.
Right. And it was just like,
did you feel like you belonged?
oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Right. And so I think even Gabor Mate says this, or I forget who it actually said. I think it was him. Anyway, it's said a lot now. It was on some TED talk, and now it's said a lot. Is the opposite of addiction is connection.
Sure. A lot of times they say like all we really wanted to was we just wanted to matter. That's how I say it to myself. I always felt like I didn't matter, even when I did matter, even when I was all that mattered, like on the baseball field and there's 2 strikes and 2 outs. I'm all that matters right now for my team, like whatever, but I never felt like it. But in recovery, I feel that. For like that's unadulterated. That's not like, oh, me and you are going to buy each other beers and we're going to do this stuff and then whatever. And then we become like family. But I got that feeling without all of that stuff.
Meaning you had meaning added to your life.
Yeah.
Right. Which Jordan Peterson gets into.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Meaning.
Without that meaning.
Right. And he's all about don't chase happiness, chase meaning.
Yeah.
Right. And what are we doing when we're living a hedonic lifestyle of drinking, drugs, partying, crazy amounts of sex, whatever, with all these different, people? What are we chasing? "Quote unquote" happiness, right? No wonder we're miserable the next day, and we just keep repeating the cycle.
Yeah. So how long were you around before you really started to turn some of these corners with like the psychiatrist stuff and what you were getting involved in AA?
Oh, I'm still turning corners. Yeah. It's a spiral upward, right? And and in many ways, it really is your higher power will not give you more than you can handle. Is what I believe. And so whatever it is, or if you just want to say it's the luck of the universe, whatever it is giving me harder and harder challenges. Right? I think I was showing you earlier.
Yeah.
I had a stalker for like 2 years, a year and a half, I should say, to be accurate.
Right.
I mean, the restraining order expired like a few weeks ago, so I'm very careful. But hardest thing I ever had to do, fight this woman in court, right? And
how did that make you feel while you were going through it? Not as a sober man, not like sober 6 months, like you've been sober a long time.
Yeah, 12 and a half years now. And so I was going through a crisis and recovery at the same time, around the same time.
Yeah.
And
what was going on?
And this is, I was going to another fellowship because I want to be very particular about this, but at the same time, I don't want to badmouth the other fellowship. Just to be clear, this was not New York City AA, and I'm not going to name the other fellowship, just so I don't gossip. But and this, because this, I mean, the thing is, this can happen in AA too, but in New York City is just such a broad, diverse fellowship. New York City AA is just such a diverse fellowship, and we have like 600 groups or 600 meetings a week. I forget the numbers, but like,
it's crazy.
Right. So if you don't like a meeting, go to a different one. But it started to become issues around control, right? And so I was having this crisis in recovery where in this other fellowship, every sponsor I tried ended up being ridiculously controlling.
Like militant controlling?
Sneaky,
or psychological?
Sneaky controlling.
Oh.
Yeah. Sneaky controlling. I can give an hour qualification on control, controlling behavior. I mean, you understand it. It ties in with codependency, it ties in with addiction.
Sure.
Right? And in my opinion, addiction is also all about control because let's say it's about addiction to a substance or anything. You're trying to take yourself out of your body. You don't want to deal with reality, so you want to control your reality, not by actually affecting, but by changing your perception of it.
Right, you're addicted to the control.
Right.
Or wanting control.
Right, and so similarly with a codependency, it's somewhat of a control of the other person. Right, this person needs to do this, that, and this in order for me to be happy.
Yeah.
Right, and so this plays out in the rooms.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I want to be clear. I have had the same AA sponsor since I had 40 days. So now that's over 12 years.
Yeah.
I've never had this problem with him.
Right.
Right. There's been 3 times where he got very stern with me. And the one time I sat down and I thought, he's right. And the other 2 times he said, well, go get an opinion from 3 other alcoholics, meaning people in recovery.
Right.
So I go and ask them, and I came back and I say, they all disagreed with you. And so you get all mad.
That's so funny.
But at least he would do that, right?
Right.
But
yeah, because you can't rely on one person to have all the information.
No. And so this is my philosophy on it now.
Mm-hmm.
AA is a program of suggestions, except one is not really a suggestion. It's more like we believe this is your higher powers will for you, and that's for you to not to drink.
Right.
Right? Because the only way the 11th step is consistent with the third tradition is if that's true.
Right.
Right? Because 11th step says you want to align your will with your higher powers will, and the third tradition pretty much says that your will has to be that you not drink in order to be a member.
Right.
Right? So the only way they was consistent is your higher power. Everything else is a suggestion. Right? And what does suggestion mean? Because this gets confused. People get this confused.
Yeah.
Suggestion means, I'm going to offer you this idea, Jared, for your consideration. That's it. Doesn't mean I think you should do that, even though I might. But if I express it like that, now it's no longer a suggestion. Now it's advice.
Yeah.
Right? And also, the reason why we quote unquote share our experience, strength, and hope, because then it more naturally comes across as suggestions. If I say, hey, Jared, if you share a problem, I say, I had a similar situation. I did this and this happened. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what I did in a similar situation and this and that happened. That comes across as a suggestion.
Right, because it's experience, strength, and hope, not theory, strength, and hope.
I give a lot of theory too. I could be cut a little bit flat, but I mean, that's just, I could be academic in that way. But I don't use theory to come up with what you should do. Right.
I know what I've done in those situations, and where it's been perilous, and even though I didn't pick up, like, it didn't work out that well. So I'll share that. So you're having this crisis, and what happens? So
I'm having a crisis in recovery, right? At this point, I think I'm like on my second sponsor, and I'm just with this crew of people who just end up being ridiculously controlling, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, the guys, the sponsors telling me like, how much I should sleep, and they're telling me what to eat, and it's just getting ridiculous. Right? If I don't call him imagine, now I'm starting to be resistant. If I don't call him on the phone, he calls me and he starts yelling at me, right? And
That's whack.
Right. So I meet this girl. Right. I meet this girl. I went to like a Friday 4 p.m. yoga class. Left work a little early. Went to a Friday 4 p.m. yoga class. Meet this girl at a juice bar. Drop dead gorgeous girl. Right. And, she starts talking to me. I start putting a little game. But you know how like some girls, they encourage it along?
Sure.
Right? They make you think you have all the game, but meanwhile it's them playing you. Right? So that's what's happening. And, she gives me her number. She's the first, and I give her my number. She's the first one to text me the next day.
Yeah.
So that's sort of, we get very involved.
Right.
And then, but, after 2-3 weeks, she starts getting very controlling. Right? So now you can imagine this case. I'm already having this crisis of control and recovery.
Right.
Right? Of like, no, you don't tell me what to do. So I'm just like, about face turned the other way.
Yeah.
Right? And then it just gets crazy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I block her. She changes her number using the Google Voice thing. Yeah.
She gets technical. She gets tactical. She gets tactical.
It gets crazy. I mean, I'll just say, like, I had restraining orders. We had an agreement. She's going to stay away. I removed the restraining order. Then she shows up again at yoga. I'm like, okay, you want to come practice? Then, like, we start hanging out again. Then it doesn't work out. Then COVID hits.
Yeah.
Now she's, like, on Zoom everywhere I am.
Oh, she was in rooms also, or no?
She wasn't making meetings in AA at the time. She was from Canada. She wasn't making meetings in AA at the time, but I was going to Zoom in this other fellowship, which I'm not going to name, right? So she starts showing up too. All the meetings I'm at. Oh, now she wants to be elected trusted servant, wherever I'm doing service.
Yeah.
And then she's hanging out around my apartment. She wants to talk to me at the meetings. Then she wants to talk to me about us. Right.
Right.
And I'm catching her on my camera. She walks down my block. Right. I get her on the security camera of the building, record that. I'm at the diner down my block. She's there staring at me. I take a picture of that.
Yeah.
Before you know, I got another restraining order.
Yeah, it's scary.
And then she gets one against me, making up all this stuff.
Yeah.
Then she gets arrested for 4th-degree stalking.
Yeah.
Then first she alleges rape. I don't get a visit from SVU, though, for 2 months. The next month, she fabricates evidence that I harassed her on Zoom. Right? Now, she has a restraining order against me. So if I do that, I'm immediately arrested.
Sure.
Right? So I get arrested for that. That gets declined prosecution because the Zoom log, she was never in class. Then I got a visit by SVU. Right? I sort of explain what's going on. And then my attorney handles it, and we show them counter evidence that, there was text messages the next day. I was like, yeah, we had sex. It was consensual. But there were text messages the next day where she's like, oh, it was so nice you came over. We cuddled after. And later on, when she's like trying to convince herself that like I'm still madly crazy about her in love, she, has like 80-something reasons. And one of them is that night I came over, we had beautiful sex, and we cuddled after.
Right.
So that's my counter evidence that I didn't rape her, right?
Right.
So, that gets squashed. And then she tries to get me arrested again on the violation of the restraining order because she says, no, I was in class. I was on a pseudonym, which she was. But we managed to stall the arrest enough where, once I got a hold of the fabricated evidence, I was able to show that it was fabricated because the Zoom log says she was logged in on a Windows machine. And the screenshot is obviously from an iPhone.
Right.
And shortly after that, she folded and I got my restraining orders. But
yeah. Now, what did you learn about yourself from that whole experience?
Oh, I can pretty much survive anything.
Did you ask yourself what about this person triggered you in the first place to like even entertain playing footsie? You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Because
yes.
Because if you go back and forth with her, it's like, okay, first time, shame on you. Second time, third time, shame on me. Yeah, of course.
I got to tell you, this was the second.
What did they say? You go from being a victim to a volunteer.
Right. No, I agree. This was the second woman I dated who was diagnosed BPD.
Yeah.
And that, I didn't stop with that. There was another girl after that.
Sure.
Right. So there was a book I read, I think it was called The Human Magnet Syndrome. And in it, he describes that there's 3 types of people a codependent matches up with. Addict/alcoholic. That's the obvious one. That's where the word comes from, codependent. Borderline personality disorder, and narcissist.
Yeah.
Right. And so that plus my own, I had to realize my own part in all these controlling behaviors in that other fellowship.
Sure.
So my friend in Al-Anon was like, Tim, your part is that you stayed.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm learning how to detach with love, because my response is, so let's say, Jared, you want me to do something, and I say no, and you keep insisting, I can snap and get very angry.
Right.
Right. So I'm learning to be able to detach with love. Now, imagine having a stalker who doesn't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
Right. That's taking it to the extreme.
Yeah.
Right. And then on top of that, I got controlling people until I was, tell me what to do with that. Give me the worst advice possible.
Yeah, it was like, it was, the cake was in the oven. Right? And here we are. And that's what happens.
Yeah.
Like, I remember my previous sponsor, Free Willy, who I love all the way to the fucking moon. And he's in Florida. If he was still in New York, he'd be my guy. But I have Yarif, and Yarif is very good. But Willie used to tell me, he used to be like, my friend, there is no such thing as love at first sight. It does not exist. So when you meet somebody and you have that fire, that's your disease and their disease doing the tango. Mm-hmm. You need to run right away. He would tell me that. He says, because there's no way. He says, that's going to be your signal. And it turned out to be very true for me. That's what I had to watch out for. And I'm like, whoa, this one could be the one. Like, right away. And then, because then I would have like these emotional swings. When this is everything, and then, she's not returning the text or whatever, then I'm nothing.
Right.
I would have those swings. So he'd be like, no. He says, it's got to be a gradual thing. So, and I remembered that. He told me that, 15 years ago. And sometimes the brakes don't work. Sometimes it's like, he would also say, listen, you can do anything you want in recovery as long as you're willing to pay the price.
So true.
We don't know what the price is going to be, but if you're willing to pay, he's like, yeah, give him a call. The 1-800-PAIN, that's what he used to call it. Go ahead, call him, 1-800-PAIN. He says, what else would he say? He's the fucking best. There's plenty of paper and pencil. We got more to work on. We'll get more to work on. Go ahead, give her a call. Mm-hmm. We'll get more stuff we'll get more columns.
Right.
But it was all like true for me, Where what you were saying before, where it doesn't have to be alcohol specifically or drug specifically. It's my relation to this thing. Mm-hmm. That's where the addiction is, or where the disease is. Right? I can do anything alcoholically. I can smoke these cigars alcoholically. Sure. We can have caffeine. Sure. We can have food.
Right.
Or I can be obsessed with, we talk about this a lot, where people have come on here and they've had like eating disorders. Mm-hmm. And they got them when they were young, right, in their teens or whatever, because like you said, it was that control, that need to control. Right. And at that portion of their life, that was the only thing they could control. Right. Mama telling you go to school, blah, 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 blah.
Or if you just have a totally dysfunctional family and there's physical, whatever, emotional, sexual abuse happening at the same time.
Sure.
Right. That's the only thing you can control.
Right. And that happens a lot. Like the eating disorders, and then cutting, or like all these things that are just like, how can I take control? Because I just want to belong. I want to matter. Right. And it's only through like being on the inside of that and also being on the outside of that and watching that with other people in recovery or other people in my family or in my life where I can just really be with empathy that I know what it's like. Like we joked, like we both at one point have had to change phone numbers. Like it's funny now, but I know what that's like when that phone rings and I can't not pick it up. There's part of me that wants to answer that, has to answer that because I matter to that person, even though they're flaming me.
Oh yeah.
They're like
they abuse you with love.
Yeah, like Elon Musk, not a flamethrower, flaming me, and I'm just like I feel like I matter with that, and I had to really work on that, and it takes a lot of. It takes a situation where you find out, it takes a situation to bring out the bravery and the courage in you. You can't just be courageous on your own. Mm-hmm. You need something there in order for that to happen. And it's a scary proposition to find out that you are capable of saying no. Mm-hmm. And saying like no, and not like no with bombs blowing up. Like no with love for me and respect and love for you. Like no.
Right. I mean, it was such a huge step for me to be able to start saying no.
Right.
Right. And of course I read all these books telling me I could say no.
Yeah.
I just never finished reading the books where they tell me how to say no nicely. Right. So when people wouldn't accept my no, right, because I was attracted to controlling people.
Sure.
Then I blow up and get really angry.
Yeah. And then what happens when you get angry?
Well, I say I don't necessarily just burn the bridge. I blow it up with C4 plastique.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very effective at getting the person to stop, because they don't, except for the stalker. But everybody, it was an effective way of removing them from my life.
Yeah.
Right. So, but it doesn't have to necessarily. I mean, some people you just. I'm still struggling with this, right? Because it feels to me, and maybe this is just some trauma from having the stalker, that some people still won't stop until I get really, really, really angry.
Right. What do? You just yell at them and say, "Get the fuck away from you, sick maniac"?
No,
obviously you're not beating people up.
I lay into them with my intellect usually,
Yeah.
peppered with all sorts of curse words and stuff like that. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I know. Then if I do this, you can never come back. That's what I used to think.
Right.
And then here they were.
Right.
Yeah, it's such a.
I mean, like right now, it's
a beautiful journey.
Yes. Yeah. So right now, I mean, one relationship I want to repair eventually is that my parents, because the controlling behavior wouldn't stop, and
you felt they were controlling.
Yeah. So I blew up at them, and that happened twice, and now we're not talking for now. But we just agreed not to talk for now.
How long has that been?
It's been about a year. We haven't been talking.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
To live with that.
Yeah. So I don't like, I know I have to make amends for the way I blew up. That's my side of the street.
Sure.
But I don't know how to make that amends without re-engaging, and then the controlling behavior starts again. Right? Because it's not my job to fix them.
Yeah.
And when you come from generations of dysfunctional family, control is part of that.
Yeah, I think I went years without talking to my dad, multiples at different points of my recovery because of how he is. And I almost have to make it like how he is, not who he is, right? Mm-hmm. But how he is. And then I got to a point where I was like, I can forgive him, and I had to make so many amends, fucking crazy. But like, I can forgive him And listen, to those people out there who don't know, making amends is not writing a letter, putting it in the mail. You're going to have to sit down. You got to pay what you owe. So, like, having to sit down.
I'm laughing because one of my amends was signing a letter.
Yeah, like, yeah, no. You get,
no, but I ran it by the thing is, it was my former boss.
Right, exactly. But with your parent is a different thing.
Oh, no, that's in person. That's in person.
Oh, my God. Yeah, so, like.
Most of my amends were in person.
Right, and I had to learn how to forgive him for not being able to give me something that he didn't have. Like, he don't have it to give.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that I'm signing up for round 12.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So how do I set that boundary? And then I remember I was going through this. I spoke about this on one of my other shows because I have my car. Like, my dad pays for my car. I can more than pay for all of my vehicles. And I do. But this one he pays for. And it's because, like, he always paid for my sister's cars, and my sister had passed away, right? So then he's like, and then I took her car because they still had the lease on it, and they were spiraling down, and they were just like, here, look, you drive the car or whatever. And I didn't want the car because that car comes with all of that control, with like, it's a good thing we got that car for you, huh?
Oh,
and all of that stuff, right? Yeah. So it comes with that. So, but they just buried their kid. So I was like, all right, none of these ideas of how to behave are my own. These come from group people in recovery and my sponsor. Because if you leave it up to me, it's like, fuck everybody, right? So then what happens is then I get whatever. So then that lease runs out. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to get you a car. That's what he said to me. And I was like, right away, impulsive, was like, no, I think I'm good. I'm good. Because I don't want all of that other stuff that's going to reignite those feelings.
Right.
And then Willie was just like, this is the ultimate service that you can provide, is allowing him to be a dad. In his mind, this is him being a dad. And he wants to be a dad. And you should allow him to be a dad. And if that means that if collectively in a whole year, if you have to eat 18 minutes worth of shit in 2-minute blocks on holiday, or when you see him when he slaps your leg, how's the truck? He's like, you can't eat 2 minutes worth of shit. Meanwhile, they were up for days worrying about you addicted and alcohol, and you can't eat shit for 2 minutes. He says that's who you are, is it, and if that's okay, because in those resentful moments, that's who you are. But then he'd be like, is that who you want to be? Because you can be this other guy where you get a brand new fucking car that you can drive around in that you don't have to pay for, and then he gets to feel good, and then 18 minutes a year at 2-minute intervals, maybe he'll throw a fucking a slider at you, and you'll just have to sit there and say thank you. And I was like, fuck. That's who I wanted to be. And I needed my higher power. I needed other people to let me see that, like, I can be that person. That was with 16 years of recovery. I finally turned that corner. But that's what it took.
Right. I'm in like super boundaries mode now, right?
No, because you're self-preservation.
Right. When my boundaries are not, a fence between me and you. My boundary is the, 20-foot concrete wall with barbed wire at top.
Yeah.
Right. And a gun pointed at the ground in case you try to dig under.
Yeah. Yeah. And
that's my boundary.
And you then you have that conversation with yourself. Is this how I want to live? And when you're ready.
Yeah. I mean, my body has to let go.
Right. That's what I mean.
Because I think it lives.
It's a physiological thing.
Right. Right.
But like I said, 15 years is almost 16 years it took for me to get there.
Right.
You're at 10 and a half years, 12 years. Yeah. So you're creeping on there. Yeah. At that time, I wasn't talking to them for years at a time. Right. Where I would yell at my mom on the phone. I say, I don't know how somebody who is such a giving, loving person like you ended up with a piece of shit fucking animal like him. That's how, that's the corner I was spraying. Yelling at my mom in the car,
Right.
making her feel bad about her choice on speakerphone with him next to her.
Oh, man.
Yeah, dude, that was there's no alcohol or drugs involved, just resentment.
Yes. Yes.
You're trying to control me. It's that whole thing that
Yes.
There's a good clip. And if I don't have my phone, which is fine, I don't want to.
Do you see what you just did there?
What?
You shared your experience on a similar problem. You
That's
didn't tell me what to do. You shared your experience. That was beautiful.
Thank you. Or Mike Tyson was talking about this with a young kid, and Tyson is like, he's one of my idols of evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And the young kid was like, somebody does me wrong, I cut him off right away. Boom, boom, boom. Right? He says, I got to protect myself, whatever. And then Mike just looked at him. It was on his show. He was like, no, man, the devil wins. And the kid was like, what are you talking about? He says, the devil wins. He says, because that guy's not your enemy now. He's your master because he controls your emotions.
Mm.
And you're not who you used to be because he took that away from you because you gave that to him.
Right.
So this is where that forgiveness is, where it's just like, I can forgive, which means remembering and letting go, but also not forgetting. Like,
Right.
listen, they ain't gonna move into my house and start controlling how much pasta we eat every fucking week.
Right.
But, it's that kind of thing. But maybe people were telling me that for however long, and I wasn't ready until I was ready. And that's the whole thing. So where are you now with your life? What's going on?
So I'm rebuilding my life right now, post-stalker.
Did you have to change jobs or anything, or no?
No. But I had to take a 3-month leave of absence from work. They let me take a leave of absence to fight the case. Then after that, I got hit by a car, fractured my wrist.
Nice.
So that took a...
Was that in New York or?
Yeah, I was in New York.
Of course you were.
Yeah. And so that's healed. I mean, now I got a titanium screw in my wrist, but, just flexibility is fine, not so fine. I've been going back to yoga, but, now I've got like...
Yoga's a big deal for you.
Yeah, it totally changed the game.
In what way?
Recovery-wise. Okay, so, and this ties into everything else we're talking about with control and relationships and the steps for me are a process of letting go.
Yep.
Right. So
Agreed.
Right. So I typically, I have, if you come around a while and you speak a fair amount, right? You have little pieces of your qualification, you have, sometimes I'll explain the steps. If I want to explain the steps quickly, right? It's just like step one, I'm letting go of the notion that I can drink or use successfully.
Yep.
Step two, I'm letting go of the notion that I could do this by myself, whether that's with people, with God, higher power, or both, right? Because I work with everybody from the devout Christian to the hardcore atheist. I have a way I can translate, right? And I think the third step is about letting go in general. So, 4 and 5, 4 gets into a lot of stuff, but I mean, in the big book, other fellowships would not so much emphasize this as much, but in the big book, there's a big emphasis on resentments, right? So you're letting go of resentments.
They say it's the number one offender in that book.
Yes.
It's pretty close.
Yeah.
Resentments or relationships are the number one offender.
I mean, some people say they don't have a resentment. I mean, and some people would say the big book was written for a certain class of person. This stereotype of
bullshit.
I think the program can still work for everybody, even if it's working for my friend. He claims he has no resentments.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
So step 6?
Well, step 5 is letting go of shame.
Sure.
Right, especially the first time you do is letting go of shame.
Yeah,
right?
You're not alone.
Right, and sometimes our addiction could be shame-based or guilt-based, right? So 6 and 7, obviously letting go of character defects. 8 and 9, you're letting go of guilt, to a large degree. And then, 10, 11, 12 are the maintenance steps.
Right.
Right. So it's step 3 is very much tied in with control. I mean, that's what it means. To turn your will over really means to let go of control. Right. And when I work with atheists, I'm like, don't worry about whether God exists or not. It's just like, if you were walking into a brick wall and you kept walking over and over and over again into the brick wall, right? The fact that God doesn't exist, you believe God doesn't exist, doesn't mean that maybe you should give up walking into the brick wall.
Right.
Right? That's where acceptance comes in. I have to accept the brick wall is there. Right? Now I can get a smart-ass alcoholic, right, and say, well, I could break down. I could get a sledgehammer or a wrecking ball.
Right.
and they're right to a degree, right? It's just like, but what is appropriate for the circumstance?
Yeah.
Right? Maybe it's just easier to walk around the wall.
Right. And respect the wall.
Right. Right? Because if it's city property or somebody else's property, right, and I start taking a wrecking ball to it, now I got the police on my ass. Right? So what were we getting into? Like, where am I at today? Right? So, I forgot how we got into about the steps of control. Oh, the yoga. Right. So, the short of it is yoga activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It's believed it's done through the vagus nerve. And so your body just like relaxes.
Right.
Right? And so if you're doing a fair amount of it, you just relax. Right? So.
Is this coupled with meditation? Like, do you have meditation practice also? Or
not seriously. I mean, you got
not like sitting down Om, but is like the yoga a form of meditation for you? Is what I'm asking.
In the 11-step sense, yes.
Right.
Right, because there's a connection with a higher power. Yes.
Right. Like that's the channel.
Right. Well, I mean, yes, the channel, the whole notion of transmitting and receiving is a very much an Oxford group notion.
Right.
But I like to try to interpret things also metaphorically, because then I can also help more people when they show resistance to certain interpretations of the steps, right?
Sure.
And so, yes, in that sense, it is a form of meditation, right? And so it's sort of like 11 steps, but now. It's when I started practicing yoga, my ability to execute on the 3rd step really took off. Right? Because I often say, like, the 12-step programs are a program of action because addiction lives in the amygdala, not in the prefrontal cortex. So you can't intellectualize your way into stopping stopping the addiction.
At all.
Right?
You can't think your way.
You can't think this is literally the science behind it. You got the prefrontal cortex, but the disease, right? If you want to call it a disease, right? And let's just say it is, right? Even if metaphorically, it lives in the amygdala, right? Or there's neurons wired in a certain way that, now you're a pickle.
Yep.
Right? And those connections, or maybe they get a little bit weak over time, they're still there, and they'll re-strengthen again if you pick up again. In general, I think.
Yes.
Right? At least I know for me.
It's been proven by me watching in
right?
the rooms.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Very quickly.
Yes. So.
Because you almost have like it's almost like the disease has muscle memory, right? It's like, oh, I know what it's like to have 7 vodkas. Next thing you know, you're sitting next to a guy, and then you don't see him again for 6 years, and then he comes back. He's like, oh, I stopped going to meetings. I had 1 drink. I'm back here 6 years later. I lost fucking everything. I'm out on the street, and I had 4 suicide attempts.
And that guy might be keeping some guy with 30 years sober that night.
100%.
Because he may be thinking of going out. That guy comes back in, has 1 day.
He keeps me sober.
He could be like, oh shoot, Thank you for keeping it green for me.
Yep.
Right? So they'll say, oh, the person with 2 days helps somebody one day. Somebody comes in with 1 day can help somebody with 30, 40, 50 years.
I've heard people sharing meetings, and this was the funniest shit I ever heard. He's like, yo, shout out to the people who are relapsing right now in the bar talking about AA with other people. How they should come back to the rooms. Like, shout out to them too. And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, shout out to them too, who are out there drinking, talking about like, I had my life together in AA, and talking about somebody. Yeah. Because all of that helps. Like, that's what they always say, the newcomer is the most important person.
Right.
And I believe that. And not
Right.
because like, oh, we need like, there's plenty of fish in the bowl. We don't need more fish in the bowl. We need us to be reminded to stay in the bowl and not jump out.
Well, it's a win-win situation.
Right.
Right. So oftentimes in life we think of things like, the only way I win is if you lose.
No.
Right. But helping people in many situations in life, especially in 12-step programs, when you help another person, obviously it's helping the newcomer, but it's helping you too.
Yeah.
Right.
This is the first place where you feel that in my life.
Right. When Bill was in Akron or somewhere in Ohio, right?
Right. It was Akron.
Right. And the business deal fell through. How did he stay sober that night?
Yeah, he called the hospital.
Yeah, he called the hospital like, I need a drunk-ass alcoholic to work with. And found Dr. Bob. They spoke that night, and he didn't drink.
Yeah. And he didn't drink because he went there with his story, not with you should A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and if you don't, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, good luck getting through to an alcoholic.
Oh my God, I yelled at a guy in the Zoom about that once because I was like, he was one of those people that was like slamming on the desk like, you need to do blah, blah, blah. And when it came around to me, I was like, listen, thank God when Ebby came down and sat down with Bill that he didn't fucking yell at him.
Right.
Right? He even let Bill drink in front of him. He was like, go ahead, man. I'm just going to tell you my story.
You want to know a little bit of piece of AA history? Because
I
right behind my current apartment where I live in Manhattan, on 23rd Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, on the south side, there's a Taco Bell. That Taco Bell is the old site of the Calvary Mission. Ebby T was staying at the Calvary Mission when he carried the message to Bill.
Wow. We should go there and have tacos. I don't eat that. That shit is fucking poison. Besides yoga, I don't eat fast food either. But shout out to Roberto. I think Roberto lives around there too.
Yeah. I see him at a meeting over there.
He's awesome.
Yeah, I saw him like a week and a half ago.
Yeah, he's a good guy, man. He's also like, he stayed. And that's the most important thing is that like, if you don't quit, it'll be so good that you can't leave, you know? And that's what I can't leave. This is like the greatest, it's the greatest on earth. It's better than anything else I've ever encountered. The people and the love. That's another thing Willie used to say, that the thing that drives people out of AA is that they can't take the love, you know? When you had all those men that came to give you their phone numbers and they didn't want anything from you. I was sitting down with this kid, and he was coming around for a while, and now he's not, and it's sad. But I would sit in the park with him, and we'd read out of the book. He's like, let me buy you breakfast. I'm like, fucking no. I was like, we're reading together, and we can go get a coffee together if you want. But then you go your way, I go my way, and you're going to have to donate your time to the next person. He didn't, everything was transactional in his whole life he had like 11 days. He's like, everything was transacted. And I was like, dude, let's just read the table of contents. Kind of see what the book is about. Because he's like, I'm ready. I was like, if you're really ready, we start on the blank page. Because if you ain't willing to go through the table of contents, you ain't ready. Right? Which is fine too.
Right.
But it was so transactional with him. He couldn't comprehend that as busy as I am, we're in my shop, we're doing all this stuff, like that I'm going to give an hour to just sit down with him. He couldn't fathom that.
Right. In general, I believe, you shouldn't rush step work, except in one exception, I'd say. If you have a chronic relapser, I think you can rush steps 1 through 9.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what happens for me is that, all of the slogans, what they say, like, when somebody's not ready, there's nothing you can say that's right, and when they are ready, there's nothing you can say that's wrong.
Right, but then there's everybody in between.
Yeah. So
right, babe. I mean, because this is not to say that what we say doesn't matter. It's just that these people are on a spectrum.
Oh, of course.
Right. So at one end of the spectrum, the person, no matter what you say, it's not going to help. The other end of the spectrum, what you say doesn't matter. They're going to get it. But then there's everybody in between.
Yeah, I think that, and then to allow the evolution, like, even though I technically made a face-to-face amends with my dad, maybe when I had 2 years or something, I didn't really let that go until 2 years ago. So, but that was it.
And in the moment, you didn't know didn't let it go.
No.
Right? And there's various degrees of letting go. And we can re-grasp it at any moment and then let it go again and re-grasp it.
That's the whole thing about resentment, right?
It can come back.
Oh, that's...
And what is my sponsor going to say? Pray for the person.
Oh, it's the worst.
It works in the moment, but then if I stop, it comes back.
Listen, I pray, whatever you guys wish me, I wish you guys double. That's my thing. Anyway, Tim, we're going to wrap it up.
Okay.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. We'll see you on the next side. Peace. Okay, everybody. We'd like to thank you for joining us on The Spiritual Experience. Please don't forget to like and subscribe on all podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, Google, Pandora, everywhere. And please find us on Facebook, where you can become part of our family. We'll see you around.